Good evening, TNT family. We are fortunate this evening to have two of our MPs, MP Rudranath Indarsingh and MP David Lee. Unfortunately, our former Minister of Energy could not make it with us tonight. He had an unexpected situation to deal with. But we're going to continue the discussion with our two MPs here. MP Lee is former minister. I mean, he's shadow minister of energy, and we're going to address some of the issues with the SRC and the impact that the oil industry uh, collapse under this government has caused on our economy in Trinidad and Tobago. So MP Inder Singh and MP David Lee, I want to welcome both of you to the program. And I would like to get your response to the Prime Minister's decision to accept the recommendation of the SRC uh, for his salary, knowing the fact that the country is in a very difficult economic situation, and a lot of people have been either laid off or they have not been able to get any kind of raise for the last couple of years. So if you can enlighten us a little bit on the situation, I would deeply appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, firstly, let me say a pleasant good night to you, Gary, and of course, my um, very dear colleague, the Member of Parliament for Point of Pierre and our Shadow for Energy and Energy Affairs, and of course, the Chief Whip in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, those who may be viewing, who may be listening and locked on. Um, the acceptance, so the governments, and by extension, the Prime Minister and the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, accepting the 120th report of the Salary Review Commission, the political leader of the UNC, and by extension, all of my colleagues have been speaking out on this issue. And we have termed it to be very obscene and what we would call totally out of sync with the reality of what is existing in Trinidad and Tobago at this point in time. This government, which is the outgoing government, they will soon be in opposition. They seem to be focused on grabbing and taking everything that will be of benefit to them, knowing fully well that they will be voted out by the population in the upcoming general elections. So, what the Prime Minister and the Cabinet has done is virtually set their pensions in such a way that whatever the political consequences, Dr. Rowley and members of his cabinet will be handsomely rewarded for their lack of leadership, their incompetence, and their inability to deliver to the population. If the government was delivering, whether it is on the economy, diversifying the economy, people were getting forex, jobs were being created, the health sector, you didn't have to wait 3 and 4 days for a bed. You could have gotten CT scans and you could have gotten x-rays and all the tests done in a very realistic time frame and so on. Last night, those I'm sure if you looked at the town hall meeting in San Fernando, in La Jolla complex in St. Joseph, I think was an overwhelming and resounding success based on the presentations of the panelists and of course Dr. Bodo, Dr. Rishi Chicharan, Dr. Rudranath, and of course the Dr. Daisley and the political leader of the party. You heard, in addition to what was presented, you heard the cries and suffering of the ordinary person when they came to the podium. And of course, Dr. Anand Chattergun summed it up in a very realistic way. The worst Minister of Health in the history of Trinidad and Tobago has emerged to be Dr. Terence D. Well, not doctor, but I'll take back that. Terence D. Elsing, whom today has caused tremendous suffering, chaos, you name it, in the health sector. And based on what was presented there yesterday, I can also bear testimony as a first-time member of parliament when Dr. Chattergoon was the medical chief of staff at the San Fernando General Hospital. He assisted me tremendously. You could have called him and I could have provided his number with any constituent. And he certainly tried his best in bringing a sense of relief to constituents of Cuba South, and I would say those who would have sought his help in a realistic time. So health, education, the energy sector, I'm sure my colleague will tell you it is in shambles, it has collapsed. What has been the success rate of this fellow they call Stuart Young, who is apparently the heir apparent, not of the PNM, but of the Prime Minister. He wants to foist this gentleman on the membership of the PNM and so on. Absolutely no success. So if the government was really delivering to the people, probably they could have saved their face and said they were entitled to. The UNC is on record saying against the backdrop of an escalation of food prices, the cost of living has escalated to the point where food prices have escalated between 45%. And of course, people are living in 2013 salaries. We have said not at this time, and we totally reject the obscene grab for what we would call wealth and greed on the part of the Prime Minister and his cabinet members. And of course, they have gone about it in a very sheepish way, very cowardly way, in the sense that whilst it's on the order paper, they have not sought to debate it. Yesterday, they went in the direction of getting the vote on the Tobago Autonomy Bill, which was stuck, I think, about 3 years in committee stage, and then the EBC draft order or report into the constituency shifts and renaming of boundaries and so on, when the number one order of business was the SRC's report. And their cowardice or their sheepish behavior is exemplified in where I think that the Prime Minister said that there's no need for debate, that this the Minister of Finance will bear or follow through on this through a circular being issued. And of course, in addition to that, the whole approach has been one where 4% for the majority of workers in the country. In addition to the 4%, your minimum wage workers got a 2% or $2 wage increase, whilst you reward yourself with an increase in the vicinity of 47%. So this reminds me of the classic literary piece that was done by George Orwell, Animal Farm. And in that, the revolution or the change was supposed to bring about an improvement in the quality of life and standard of living for all. But in this instance, it seems to be a straightforward case of being some animals are more equal than others. So the behavior of the Prime Minister and Stuart Young and Faris Al-Rawi and Indarsingh and Camille Robinson Regis reminds me of Napoleon and Squealer and all those characters in that great piece of literary work entitled Animal Farm. So I will rest my opening remarks there, and probably my colleague may want to join and we could go off in other directions this evening.
Indarsingh, Rudy, my colleague, my brother, I call him my friend. Let me just elaborate a little bit on what Rudy spoke about in his opening remarks, especially under the SRC, the Salary Review Report. And he's correct in everything that he has said so far. And I would just like to add a bit on it. As you well know that, coming out for the last 9 years, our energy sector has been decimated by this present government, led by Prime Minister Rowley and the Minister of Everything, who is the present Minister of Energy, Stuart Young. And what's interesting is that MP Indarsingh and myself being the MP for Pointe-a-Pierre, which was renamed interestingly yesterday in the EBC report, the election and boundary report that was passed in Parliament yesterday, no longer will be called Pointe-a-Pierre. So they have even decimated the name Pointe-a-Pierre, and it will be changed in the next election. It will be known as Claxton Bay. All right. So and MP Indarsingh's constituency, which is in Couva South, has a major part in the energy sector, which is the Point Lisas industrial estate. Pointe-a-Pierre was the Pointe-a-Pierre refinery, that whole Petrotrin compound, which now houses Paria Fuel Trading Company and the Guaracara Park, or the Guaracara refinery, which is in ruins and in scrap iron. So it is interesting that Rudy and myself, while being not only brothers and friends and colleagues, we straddle constituencies, both Couva South and Pointe-a-Pierre, that generates a lot of revenue for our country. And over the last 9 years, it has been decimated. We all know the whole issue with the shutdown of the Petrotrin refinery. We all know the issues of the shortage of gas that we have been having over the last 9 years under this regime, this present set of this government, which have done nothing to increase our production in gas, which is so critical for Rudy's constituency in Couva South, the Point Lisas industrial estate, because most of these plants, some have been shut down, some have been idled. They just don't have the amount of gas to be able to have 100% level of production in the plant. So a lot of those plants, while they do exist because of the shortage of gas, most of them run between 60 and 70% production, which impacts on our revenue earning capacity in respect of foreign exchange earnings, and also taxes from the Point Lisas industrial estate. So I just want to mark that as my opening remarks in a sense of the energy sector, and we will always get back to it. Now, it is interesting that Prime Minister Rowley has no problem taking his increase in salary as Prime Minister / pension based on the latest SR, the 120th report of the Salary Review Commission of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I have a copy of it here. I don't a hard copy, so for your audience can see it. So what I'm quoting is from the actual report to your listeners and viewers out there. So it is interesting that a few years ago, and Rudy will remember, that when they were negotiating the 4% increase, or were offering the 4% increase and talking about back pay to public servants, Prime Minister Rowley went on a public platform and talked about, they have consequences if you demand too much, and if you demand your back pay and you demand a certain wage increase, there will be consequences for the country, the economy, and so forth. And he was warning the public servants and the state enterprises, the unions, that demanding too much will have any consequences for you as workers and for the economy and for the country. That was like about 3 or 4 years ago. And then up until recently, with the whole energy sector and the where they placed all their eggs in the baskets in the cross-border gas with Venezuela. The Prime Minister, even Colin Lindbergh, the Minister of Finance, even the Minister of Energy was saying that, you have to tighten your belt, hold strain until this country would not see any sort of economic resurgence in the energy sector until about 2025, 2028, I am seeing at best. All right, now at best, that was a couple months ago, with a change in the geopolitics with a new president coming on board in next month, I think January 24th. There are certain things that could change further, and that could lengthen, our cross-border negotiations and even trying to get gas from Venezuela. So it is interesting that I lay that groundwork, and this is from the mouth of Prime Minister Rowley, not from Rudy Indarsingh or David Lee or even our political leader, the Honorable Kamala Prasad-Bissessar. This is the picture that Prime Minister Rowley would have painted to the country, would have spoken to the population and given them the impression that things are bad and we have to hold strain, tighten our belt, and you would have seen the whole issue about the foreign exchange issues we are having in the last few weeks, in the last few months, but we are saying, the opposition is saying, it did not start a couple of months. This has been happening over the last 9 years under Prime Minister Rowley, Minister Imbert as Minister of Finance, and Stuart Young. So it is interesting that, that the 120th report that we have here, that Prime Minister Rowley all of a sudden forgot what he told the population about the constraints of the economy, the constraints in foreign exchange, tighten your belt, and he's prepared to accept the good work, according to him. This is good work by the Salary Review Commission of the 120th report. Now, MP Indarsingh will bear me out also that when the first, I think it was earlier this year, when the first report came out from the Salary Review Commission, I think it was the 117th report, and when the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Imbert, brought it to Parliament, they had mentioned, and it was raised after review, and I think maybe MP Indarsingh would have raised it, that when you looked at the increase or the change in salary for the industrial court judges, and on the 117 report, which was very strange. The industrial court, which is here now, this is the page for industrial court. The industrial court salaries on the 117th report, that was, I think was laid in January or February earlier this year, it showed a decrease in the industrial court judges. So what, in simple terms, they came up with a review or compensation package for the industrial court judges. And what they were telling the industrial court judges in the 117 report, that your salary or your income would be less than what you were earning presently. So, which we all found, the whole country, even Minister Imbert, found that that was strange. So that they sent it back to the Salary Review Committee to look at and to make the changes. And the only changes that we were aware of that was supposed to have happened was to relook or revisit the compensation area of those industrial court judges. Lo and behold, when we received the 120th report, we now see that the Prime Minister has now salary has now gone to $87,847 with effect from October the 1st, 2023. So, and it is the first time, MP Indarsingh will also bear me out, in this report, it is the first time that the Prime Minister's salary or income is now going to be higher than the President of our country. Never before that has happened. And that is where the entire bacchanal started to take place. So that the Prime Minister says, good work. This is good work. Because I'm sure he's great. He agrees with the great work because his salary alone went from whatever it is now of $50,000 thereabout to $87,847. $87,847 a month. So he would find it is great work. And we have been saying And MP Indarsingh has been saying, the political leader, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, saying it is obscene in the times that we are in, without any proper justification, for the Prime Minister to come and say that he is prepared to accept this report as is and put it in play, meaning to approve it, and the Minister of Finance will then effect these new salaries, or it will come into play in being. I am assuming, we are assuming, shortly or soon, because we haven't been given a date when this would happen. So that is the obscene thing about this government with this SRC report. And as Rudy would have said, maybe the Prime Minister is seeing the writing on the wall for his present government, and he's trying to set himself up nicely and handsomely. Because even if he's no longer the Prime Minister, which we know he would not be, his salary, his pension would be the same monthly as what his Prime Minister's salary would be. So when they approve, according to Prime Minister Rowley, they are going to approve this. So even if in the next general election, whenever that is due or called, and Prime Minister Rowley loses, and he's no longer the Prime Minister, his monthly pension would be the same amount as if he was Prime Minister, of $87,847. So, along with all his other ministers, because they had passed that pension rule or law a couple of years ago, that your salary would be, your pension would be in line with what your salary was as a minister and Prime Minister. So Prime Minister Rowley has nothing to lose. He's setting himself up, whether he wins or loses the next general election. He himself personally will be well taken care of based on what he has approved for himself and his government. So it is obscene, as we all agree, the opposition agrees, it's obscene, and not only obscene, but on Saturday, Gary, MP Indarsingh, along with Senator Wade Mark, we were part of that union rally or clarion cry they had outside Whitehall in the Queen's Park Savannah. Saturday morning, we were there in solidarity with all the unions who were against the same SRC report approved by Prime Minister Rowley. And we were joined by other small political parties, and all the different unions were there voicing their concerns. And so maybe MP Indarsingh could elaborate, because I know JTUM, who was the lead body on Saturday's rally, also did enough performance appraisal on this present government and this present Prime Minister. And maybe Indarsingh could elaborate a little bit on the performance of what JTUM and the unions came up with on this present government. So I yield back at this point in time.
Thank you, MP Indarsingh. I think your mic is muted over there. Check your mic.
In terms of pointing out, sorry about that. So I muted my mic to ensure that there was no feedback and so on. But Dr. Lee was spot on in terms of pointing out to you the various anomalies in the context of the 117th SRC's report, and also when it was sent back, why it was sent back. And it had nothing to do with the salary of the Prime Minister in terms of adjusting the salary and so on. And he, like all of us, we are in possession of this report, so they cannot say that Dr. Lee or the opposition is fabricating. They always like to come with this line that we fabricate and we don't speak the truth, and we are unpatriotic, and we like to engage in old talk and so on. And this was clearly demonstrated yesterday when the leader of the opposition was interrogating the Prime Minister during the debate on the autonomy bill and so on, and even during the committee stage, when our colleagues were prosecuting, the Prime Minister attempted to engage in this what we would call mauvaise behavior, to accuse the leader of the opposition of being cantankerous. It's not a question of being cantankerous, it's a question of holding or bearing the government to account. So what he has stated are the facts and the true facts as it relates to how we arrived at the 120th report, and it had nothing to do with salary increases for any prime minister and so on. And it had to do with an anomaly that was supposed to be reviewed, but we don't know if they choreographed or whatever they did in sending it back, what was the clear agenda of the government. So with that in mind, of course, as Dr. Lee said, we had a very strong showing outside of the Whitehall. It was a protest by civil society with sort of focus on Trinidad and Tobago being in crisis. And of course, in addition to the leadership rally, or what we may call the executives of the major trade unions under the umbrella bodies of JTAM and NATUC and the wider civil society. You had a number of other individuals from the smaller political parties. So you would have had, if I could recollect clearly, OWTU, the Public Services Association, the Communication Workers Union, Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, the Contractor and General Workers Trade Union, the Transport and Industrial Workers Trade Union, the Aviation, Communication and Allied Workers Union, the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association, and doctors were there. And in addition, the smaller political parties, representatives of NTA, HOPE, and MSJ, and so on. And the UNC had quite a credible showing that was led by our deputy political leader, Dr. Lee, myself, Senator Mark, and we had the mayor of Chaguanas, but other persons from different areas within the geography of the country who are members of the UNC. And as Dr. Lee said, if you are seeking a wage increase, and in the modern day of what we would call a trends of what we might term, when persons seek to justify compensation and so on, or better packages, you are inclined to do a performance appraisal. And that is what I said earlier on.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, you to justify if you are rewarding workers, at whatever level, working class, middle class, managers, and so on, at the level of executive position, you always do a performance appraisal. You reflect, you try to establish benchmark comparators and so on. And you, in retrospection, you look at what has been delivered, what has been achieved. And my opening remarks, as I said, every minister has failed to deliver. If you look at whether it is the health, education, infrastructure, energy, tourism, you name it, we are in shambles today. The Minister of Finance, who is supposed to be leading the charge with all the other ministers, especially in trade and industry and commerce and tourism, and growing this economy. We are in negative economic growth, more or less. We have not achieved what we would call, we have run deficit budgets for the last how many years. I think the only time we realized a surplus budget was as a result of the war in Ukraine, when the Minister of Finance attempted to mama guy and through his propaganda to portray to the population that it was the government's management of the energy sector and management of the overall economy led to the surplus budget. And Dr. Lee has the data. He could tell you about where we are with oil production in terms of land production, also with gas production and so on. We have continued to decline, and that is why we are in such a bad shape. And that was clearly demonstrated by the Minister of Finance in his affidavit that went before the Privy Council as it relates to the government articulating its case, why it needed the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority. This government is broken, and this is a very desperate Minister of Finance, a finance minister who cannot be trusted against the backdrop of what has been brought to the fore by the Auditor General, and I think that the judicial officer is has been very concerned about the fact that probably there's the need to investigate, or the Minister of Finance must come under further scrutiny for the, and I use this very guardedly, based on the work of the Auditor General, where there are allegations of $3.5 billion being that are missing in terms of the accounts for 2023. And also in recent times, where the leader of the opposition dealt with what the latest fiasco in terms of this government spending and so on. Now we see they always preach and tell you that they do more with less, and they more with less, and you are getting value for your money, and that the UNC was always in corruption, and the UNC was misspending and misappropriating, and there were massive cost overruns and so on. And in 9+ years, no minister of Mrs. Prasad Bissasa's government has been charged or has been brought before the courts of this country for any wrongdoing from a criminal point of view, and is the subject of what we will call criminal prosecution in terms of corruption and so on. And then you have Minister Imbert, the latest fiasco. Mrs. Prasad Bissassa caught him. He had to eat his humble pie. He was caught out where there was, she had the facts and so on, and I'm sure that Dr. Lee read from a report in the pavement, on the pavement report last Thursday out in Caroni Central, and I'm sure when I give way to him in a minute or two, he could provide further data and facts as it relates to this particular issue, where she made a clear-cut allegation, or I should say she brought the facts that the airport terminal, which, because this is not a whole airport, there's a terminal really that is being constructed in Tobago, that it was it is now in I think over $462+ million in a cost overrun, and that figure will climb. So that airport could cost Trinidad and Tobago taxpayers more than what it costs the Piarco airport, and we must do a comparison in terms of the size of the Piarco airport as against the size of what we could call the Tobago terminal, which is being constructed. And again, this Minister of Finance misled the population when he attempted to berate the leader of the opposition for bringing the facts to the country and seeking to call him out on this massive overrun, cost overrun at the Tobago terminal. And also, this minister seems to enjoy what I would call going off in a tangent of attempting to berate and belittle and so on. In his last press conference, he held two press conferences, and it's passing strange that a man who cannot account for $3.5 billion being misspent or not being properly accounted for was sent again to account for $461 plus million in overspend by this government. And he again attempted to berate and belittle and create a circus as it relates to the line of questioning that was being pursued by reporters in the interest of getting information for the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of holding the government to account. So when you look at what this opposition has been doing from day one, is through Mrs. Prasad Bisesa and all, well, my colleagues who are with us in the context of the UNC, we have been exposing this government in terms of fiasco after fiasco, misdeed after misdeed, corruption after corruption, and we have been standing strong on the public platform in exposing the shortcomings of this government. And this is why I want to say today, we have the government on the ropes. We will deliver the knockout punch when the general elections are called. And at this point in time, I'm sure Dr. Lee will want to build on the fiasco at the Tobago terminal in terms of the construction, because he is in possession of some very alarming but factual information on what has transpired under the watch of not only the Minister of Finance, but under the watch of the Prime Minister, who is a Tobagonian and who was pursuing this project, I think, from a legacy point of view, to say that he was the Prime Minister and his government built it for the benefit of the people of Tobago.
We seem to put them on the defense because from a government, you couldn't get any explanation or answers from. All of a sudden, we had two press conferences with him coming back trying to clarify and defend himself. But I'm going to put it over to MP Lee as you give us some clarification on this situation.
Sure. First, let me again follow up on what MP Indarsingh has been saying just now. And before I get into the Tobago airport fiasco, I just want to build on a point that MP Indarsingh said, that this present government is broke, and this government has broken this country financially, and MP Indarsingh is correct. What is interesting is that over the years, when this government first came into existence in 2015, September the 9th, I think it was 2015, when they took government. And for the last, especially the last first 3 or 4 years, their mantra, their theme that used to come out of each of those ministers' mouths, especially Faris and Seo Jung, is that they were talking about value for money. You know, that this present government, I mean the PNM government, when we do things, we give the country value for money, and you know, and we do things, you know, with we manage projects better. That was their mantra in the first 3 or 4 years. But somewhere along the line, that has never been so. But what has happened, especially coming out of that town hall public health meeting that we had in La Jolla in the constituency of St. Joseph last night, and it was an overwhelming success, as MP Indarsingh said, led by the political leader, Kamala Prasad Bisesa, and the panel that was there last night, a very powerful panel from the health sector. What was interesting in keeping with this thing, this mantra, these words of this government called value for money, What is interesting in Dr. Richard Sicharan, in his sort of recap, in one of his summaries last night, um, who is Dr. Rishi is the present MP for Caroni East. What he told the audience and the listeners and the viewers out there last night, and it struck a chord with me, that this government supposed to have built, as part of their their performance, 4 hospitals, one in Point Forte, Arima, the Central Block extension in the General Port of Spain Hospital, and the fourth one, I think, is Sandy Grande Hospital. And what was alarming to me as a member in the audience is that Dr. Rishi Sicharan, when he did his research, said that those 4 hospitals had cost overruns of over 1 billion TT dollars. Not building the hospital, cost overruns to build those 4 hospitals of over $1 billion. Could you imagine that what this country could have done with that $1 billion in those cost overruns for those 4 hospitals? And then you have the Tobago Hospital, where we have estimated to be cost overruns of over $461 million and counting to date. So don't be fooled by what the media release that Imbert put out today and the media conference that he had a couple of days ago. He is fighting for survival. And what is also interesting in the whole Tobago fiasco is that this particular airport, or all airports, whether it is Piaco, whether it is Tobago A&R Robinson presently existing right now, falls under the remit of the Minister of Works and Transport. But yet, to date, not one word you have heard coming out of the mouth of Rohan Sinanan. And the public and your listeners and your viewers have to ask the question, why have we not heard anything from the mouth of Rohan Sinanan about that building or project extension of the Tobago A&R Airport? And that is an interesting point I've just put out there. And why is it that Minister Imbert, as the Minister of Finance, yes, he pays the bills, but why is he taking front in this whole airport called the extension of the A&R Robinson Airport in Tobago? And the public must ask this question: why is Rohan Sinanan so silent in all of this? And I ask the question: is Rohan Sinanan in charge? Is he, as the de facto minister, in charge of the Tobago airport? Or is it Minister Imbert that is in charge? Because Minister Imbert pays the bills or releases monies on behalf of all ministries. But I've never seen Minister Imbert take the limelight or account to when a school is being built, or even when I just spoke about the 4 hospitals that had cost overruns. I've never seen him come to defend those cost overruns for those hospitals. Why is he now coming out and being asked to defend the Tobago extension? Is it somewhere along the line that Minister Imbert is in charge of this project and he has allowed it to get away from him? And now he is being asked by his colleagues, you go and take the heat on that Tobago project, because he does not even have a joint press conference with Rohan Sinanan, who is the de facto Minister of Works. He does it by himself. And we must ask these questions. Why is that? Now,
Exactly.
Right. The last few days, I mean, the leader of the opposition has has gotten some good information in her mailbox. She was the first one, as always, to bring that information out to the public of Trinidad and Tobago. I think Minister Imbert was caught flat-footed. He didn't cater for us having the report. He didn't cater for the last one of us having that cabinet note. I think he was caught very unaware that that cabinet note would have been leaked on this whole issue of cost overruns on that Tobago project. And we have said it before, the political leader, the opposition leader, Rudy Indarsingh, myself on platform, we have spoken about that Bleeds report that talks about the issues with the airport, the McDonald report that was first instituted, the commissioned in November 2023. And what this government is really doing, Gary, is trying to open that airport as quickly as possible, because that is, as MP Indarsingh said, is Prime Minister Rowley's legacy project. All right, so he really doesn't want to call elections and take the chance of losing elections without opening that airport or cutting that ribbon, or at least having his name on a plaque in that ANR extension airport. So maybe even Imbert is also hustling to try and achieve that, because maybe Minister Imbert's name has to go on that plaque also. Maybe it's a dual name of Prime Minister Rowley and Minister of Finance Imbert, and they have left out Rohan Sinanan on name of that plaque. So, so we ask these questions because there's a lot more that does not meet the eyes of that Tobago airport. So you have over $1 billion in cost overruns in the 4 hospitals that this government said they built. You have over $400 million and counting on this Tobago extension. And MP Indarsingh is correct. It is not a new airport like what we know the new Piarco airport was or is, where we all grew up. In my time, we knew the old Piarco airport, and this new airport that we have in Trinidad is an entire new airport, new location, and
courtesy of a UNC government.
Under UNC government, and it was highly criticized. Even past Prime Minister Pandey paid a price for that airport, and now we have an extension of a Tobago airport extension that will cost more at the end of the day than the Piarco UNC built new airport. But yet nobody in this country is alarmed at the cost of that Tobago airport as yet. No one is alarmed of that $1 billion overruns in those 4 hospitals that this present PNM government built. No one is alarmed that what this government is doing is borrowing, as MP Indarsingh said, they have broken this country financially. They are now keeping it alive by borrowing money, foreign, not only local, but on a foreign market. You know why they're borrowing money on the foreign market? Because that loan will come in US dollars, and that US dollars will assist in the short supply of our foreign exchange fiasco that is taking place in this country. Prime Minister Rowley said that in Parliament. I asked him a question. Why are you borrowing money, which is more expensive on the international market and have to be repaid in US dollars, as opposed to borrowing the money on the local market? And Prime Minister said in his response to my question that how you expect us to get foreign exchange, right? So he's not earning a foreign exchange from revenues, they're earning foreign exchange to prop up our supply by borrowing on the international market, loans on the international market. So we have lots of issues in this country, run by Prime Minister Rowley and his team, which are very incompetent. They have mismanaged this country over the last 9 years. The leader of the opposition, on time and time again, has broken stories and given the facts to the population. One would remember it was the leader of the opposition, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, that broke the news about that whole fiasco with Commissioner of Police merit list that Prime Minister Rowley went and interfered and pulled back that merit list that was sent to the president's office. Mrs. Predecessor broke the story about the oil fiasco in Petrotrin. Mrs. Predecessor broke this present story of, and there were so many more, but this present one of the ANR cost overruns. All right, so there's so many other issues that Mrs. Predecessor brought out to the and it is very disheartening to hear from naysayers that the opposition is not doing the work that is not doing the work for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And we beg to differ. MP Indarsingh, time and time he has said, we go on political platforms and we raise issues. But if there's one thing that I can say that I was happy with on Saturday, especially being on a Saturday, was the number, the hundreds of people that came out in support of what JTAM was doing in front of Whitehall on Saturday morning. And I really
you won't see the media. You won't see the media broadcasting too much of that. To give an idea of how much support they had out there. So we have to do what we have to do.
The mainstream media is not what I think you and I would depend on anymore. You have the social media platforms and so forth. But the word is out there, and I really hope that it is not a one-off situation. I said that in an article. I really hope that it is a momentum that we will build on, and people like yourself, Gary, has to keep the pressure on. The 19 members in the opposition and 6 senators cannot do it alone. All right, and that is what I find is so disheartening by the population who
Absolutely,
from
we need
whatever
them to step up.
walk of life, they keep feeling that the 19 MPs and the 6 senators should take all the licks, should come out there and take all the licks, pound the pavement, end up being called all kinds of names, and yet the normal people would not come out, and they are the ones that are suffering, and we are fighting for them. So I yield back at this time.
It is really concerning for me living outside the country and seeing the lack of support from the people who really needs this help, stepping up and joining the opposition in the fight for the kind of information that's brought forward, and still you don't see that support. And to know the damages, the amount of people out of work, the situation like what we saw last night a little bit with the healthcare situation, the quality of healthcare that's taking place in the country, and yet we have to step up and represent ourselves in this fight. We cannot. There's no room for spectators. This is a war, and all soldiers on board is absolutely necessary and has to join this fight. This is a rescue mission for ourselves, and we definitely need to get on board with the opposition in this fight. I also see. I also saw. I think Dr. Rowley is setting us up in a very difficult economic situation on their exit of government. So we have a lot of investigation to do. When we forensic investigation, we take government to deal with them and hold them accountable, because we will have to force them to declare their wealth. And every MP Indarsingh, over to you.
Yes, and there's the important issues of where the suffering and the pain of the people continues to
so we on the news, we on the 7 o'clock news tonight.
Continues to be part and parcel of the problems impacting upon the people of this country. Whether it is in the context of unemployment, over 120,000 plus people persons have lost their jobs in this country as a result of the government's whole anti-worker, anti-people, anti-union approach, whether it is at UTT, at Petrotrain at TSTT. They are threatening at Wassa and so on. And we do not know what can unfold at the port and TNTech and also at the Water and Sewerage Authority, WASA. And when you look also at the state of infrastructure in this country, infrastructure is something that has collapsed. We must always remember that our government, when I say the partnership government, delivered, whether it was on drainage, whether it was on the paving of main roads and local government roads and so on. We delivered, whether it was the Diego Martin Highway or the highway to Point 14 was a work in progress when we demitted office, the Cuba Presal interchange, the Valencia bypass road, and we could go on and on in terms of the major landmark projects that was delivered from a road infrastructure and road network point of view. Today, in all of the opposition constituencies, I could tell you that there's a road called the Calcutta number 2 road. That the last time that road was paved was when the partnership government was in power. It is now probably one of the worst roads. You have in Pointe-à-Pierre, you have in MP Benjamin's constituency of Maruga Tableland. I know my colleague MP Richard Sicharan, he has been championing one called Welcome Road and so on. And when I move around Trinidad and Tobago, well, more so Trinidad, and you see paving projects, road paving projects, and these are not main roads. When you go to Tunapuna and St. Augustine, behind the law school and the university area and so on, you will see Bellsmith Street, Jackson Street, Warren Street, Gordon Street, and so on. If you go into Tunapuna and Aruka, Maloney, and all these constituencies which have been controlled by the PNM, road paving is taking place at an alarming rate under Minister Rohan Sinanan. So when we raise in the parliament, whether it is questions or notice, written questions, we file motions on the adjournment and so on. And we are told that the road paving projects will occur in Cuba South, but it will all be dependent on subject to funding. Well, how is the funding not forthcoming for the constituency of Cuba South, but the funding is being found for the constituencies under the control of the People's National Movement? So it's a question of really, it is a question of discrimination. It has to be discrimination. It was one of maneuvering the resources for the well-being of securing votes. But I think that the people have made out this government, in terms of their lies, their mamagai, and their last-minute deceit and so on. So I think that all attempts to continue with this, what we would call 23rd hour road paving projects and so on, will find them not enjoying the support of the population and so on. And when we look at where we are in the context of crime, only today, a businessman in the constituency of Cuba South who was brutally murdered on Saturday morning outside of his business place. He was buried today. And there is no comfort that has been brought to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We were told by the Prime Minister that when he appointed to the cabinet and made him a minister in the Ministry of National Security, Minister Keith Scotland, with sole responsibility to focus on the police service. We were told, and he was sold with PNM propaganda as being a silver bullet for bringing a reduction in serious crimes and home invasions and murders and robberies and so on. And we seem to have had a spiral since he has been appointed, especially in the context of extortion, home invasion, kidnapping of businessmen. The business community feels no safer, but for some reason, he's always graciously welcomed by the Chaguanas Chamber of Commerce into
Amazingly.
their precincts and so on.
That is very concerning, to see what's taking place and to know that in spite of all what's happening, we cannot seem to organize ourselves to deal with the issue, and that is something we will have to pick up on another day. I know you guys have some other uh, things to attend to,
Yeah.
but a couple of minutes, if is any last thing that you would like to wrap up here, MP Lee.
Yeah, let me just add to what MP Indarsingh was talking about infrastructure before we end. And Indarsingh talked about these, I would call them not minor roads off the highway, but we have a fiasco under Rohan Sinanan since I think more than a year plus, where on a daily basis, traffic is backed up going north, going south, because of that repair work or that extra lane they have been adding or trying to add between Chaguanas exit to Chase Village exit, which is about maybe 2 kilometers. Of the distance is about 2 kilometers, if I am correct. But for over 12 plus months on a daily basis, we, citizenry in their vehicles have to endure pain and stress for hours on a daily basis, whether they are going to San Fernando or the south part of the island, or whether the southerners are coming into Port of Spain. We normally have, in the morning rush hour traffic and the afternoon rush hour traffic. We normally have that stress, and we have been dealing with that. But for the last 12 months plus, just to increase a third lane in approximately 2 kilometers, straight road, this is straight highway. They cannot, this incompetent government, Rohan Sinanan, cannot achieve that. So that alone, Gary, for the kind of man hours and stress and tormentation that the general public endures on a daily basis, 7 days a week, by this wicked government, just to increase a third lane, they cannot get it right. Part of that third lane issue, I think one of the contractors had put inferior material and they had to remove it. But that took months for them to discover that some sort of inferior material was utilized by one of the contractors. So, and no one is held to account by this government. But they're quick to blame the UNC government. They're quick to blame Kamala Prasad Bissessa. And the citizens and the population do not come out and say enough is enough. Just that torture on a daily basis between Chase Village and if you're going into Port of Spain even though the repairs start from Chase Village, traffic is backed up as far as Cuba.
I saw some of it. I was there a few months ago, and I saw some of it. Yeah.
All right. And if you're coming from Port of Spain to south, the traffic is backed up as far as Grand Bazaar because of that, mismanagement of that 2 kilometer straight piece of road to add a third lane.
Yeah, just imagine that. They can't get done in an efficient manner.
They cannot get that. Over 12 months, we have been enjoying that pressure, right? And no, and this population, the people of this country just says, okay, we take it. So I really hope that something is done and said when the next election is called. Just for that alone is enough to vote this government out. So I think I have added what I wanted to say on your program here tonight. Just one other thing with what MP Darsing was talking about as far as crime. It is interesting that MP Darsing had to attend the funeral of a businessman in his constituency, and just Thursday, December the 5th, which was last Thursday, you have on the news day where I don't know if you've seen it, Gary, where one of the
Seen it very
DCPs
clear, very clear.
is saying a steady dip in murders, right? This is Thursday last week on the news day. They are saying, the commissioner of police and her team is saying, we're seeing a steady dip in murders. And on the same Thursday,
In
Gary,
which planet? Maybe on the clouds.
right? No, but in the same Thursday, on another newspaper, soldier shot dead in car. And then I think on Friday night or that Thursday night, we saw a terrible hit on another businessman in the Southland coming out of a restaurant in South. We
Yeah,
saw
we saw
another
that on video.
businessman. We saw another MP in Darsing lost a businessman in his constituency of Cooper South. I think one was done over the weekend in Shogunas area. So I really don't know where this government is in La La Land, talking about a steady dip in murders. So I think those few words, we have been on your program for more than an hour now. So I thank you as always, and I yield to my colleague, my brother, MP Indarsingh.
I just want
Thank you
to
very much,
reiterate.
Doc.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Leas. Gary, we have an engagement from a political and party point of view to join online too. Um, the issues are very clear. The UNC will continue through the focus of the political leader and all my colleagues in the context of holding the government to account. We do not know how long the parliamentary term will be for, because with the EBC report being debated now, the Prime Minister procedurally has the green light to call the general election, which I think he has between now and the end of 2025 he can go to. But it has been clearly um, revealed, whether it is in the parliament or outside of the parliament, by this UNC um, opposition through the leadership of Kamla Prasad Bisasa, that this government has failed the people of Trinidad and Tobago miserably. And all we have to continue to do is hold them to account, continue to reveal their shortcomings, and I am sure that as we continue to get our house in order through, with the passage of time, screening and other initiatives, the United National Congress under the leadership of Mrs. Prasad Bisasa will be the next government of Trinidad and Tobago. So thank you very much.
I want to thank both of you for taking the time to join me, MP Lee and MP Indarsingh. I want to continue to use this channel to educate our people both inside and outside the country of what's taking place, so that they have the facts, so that they are educated voters making the right decision when the time comes, that they don't buy into the propaganda that the PNM has been selling. And so I want to thank you both, and I want to thank the listening audience. And I would like to also reiterate that this channel is always available for our people to discuss the issue. So with that, I will say good night and thank you very much. Good night, everybody.